Hello, my name is Cecil, and I'm reading the book of Acts with the Message translation. Today I'm going to pick up in Acts chapter 14. Hope you enjoy. When they got to Iconium, they went, as they always did, to the meeting place of the Jews and gave their message. The message convinced both Jews and non Jews, and not just a few either. But the unbelieving Jews worked up a whispering campaign against Paul and Barnabas, sowing mistrust and suspicion in the minds of the people in the street. The two apostles were there a long time, speaking freely, openly, and confidently as they presented the clear evidence of God's gifts, God corroborating their work with miracles and wonders. But then there was a split in public opinion, some siding with the Jews and some with the apostles. One day, learning that both the Jews and non Jews had been organized by their leaders to beat them up, they escaped as best they could to the next towns: Laconia, Lystra, Derbe, and that neighborhood. But then we're right back at it again, getting out the message. There was a man in Lystra who couldn't walk. He sat there crippled since the day of his birth. He heard Paul talking, and Paul, looking him in the eye, saw that it was ripe for God's work, ready to believe. So he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Up on your feet." The man was up in a flash, jumped up and walked around as if he'd been walking all his life. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they went wild, calling out in their Lycaonian dialect, "The gods have come down, these men are gods." They called Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes, since Paul did most of the speaking. The priests of the local Zeus shrine got up a parade. Bulls and banners and people lined right up to the gates, ready for the ritual of sacrifice. When Barnabas and Paul finally realized what was going on, they stopped them. Waving their arms, they interrupted the parade, calling out, "What do you think you're doing? We're not gods. We are men just like you, and we're here to bring you the message, to persuade you to abandon these silly God superstitions and embrace God Himself, the living God. We don't make God, He makes us. And all of this, sky, earth, sea, and everything in them. In the generations before us, God let all the different nations go their own way. But even then, He didn't leave them without a clue, for He made a good creation. He poured down rain and gave bumper crops. When your bellies were full and your hearts happy, there was evidence of good beyond your doing. Talking fast and hard like this, they prevented them from carrying out the sacrifice that would have honored them as gods, but just barely. Then some Jews from Antioch and Iconium caught up with them and turned the fickle crowd against them. They beat Paul unconscious, dragged him outside the town, and left him for dead. But as his disciples gathered around him, he came to and got up, and he went back into town, and the next day left with Barnabas for Derbe. After proclaiming the message in Derbe and establishing a strong core of disciples, they retraced their steps to Lystra, then Iconium, and then Antioch. And they were putting muscle and sinew in the lives of the disciples, urging them to stick with what they had begun to believe and not quit, making it clear to them that it wouldn't be easy. Anyone signing up for the kingdom of God has to go through plenty of hard times. Paul and Barnabas handpicked leaders in each church. After praying, their prayers intensified by fasting. They presented these new leaders to the Master to whom they had entrusted their lives. Working their way back through Pisidia, they came to Pamphylia, and they preached in Perga. Finally, they made it to Attaleia, and they caught a ship back to Antioch, where it had all started. Launched by God's grace and now safely home by God's grace. A good piece of work. On arrival, they got the church together and reported on their trip, telling in detail how God had used them to throw the door of faith wide open so people of all nations could come streaming in. Then they settled down for a long, leisurely visit with the disciples. Thank you for joining me in the reading of Acts 14. Please come back tomorrow as we will pick up Acts 15. Have a great day.